Started. There it is then. So welcome everybody to this month's Professional Development Consortium of Hampton Roads workshop. Today we're focusing on membership feedback. Scott Wiersing, who I have known for I think several years anyways, does this stuff for Truist, and he does this stuff for has done it for other organizations. I met Scott, I think it was about 9 years ago. The first time I attended the meeting of a local professional society, Scott was the presenter there. So yeah, that's about 9 years I've been learning from and with Scott. So I'm really happy he could join us today. We'll be sharing out Scott's presentation as well as himself. I encourage you, because you'll see your screen shift a little bit, to make sure you've got your chat box open. You'll see the floating commands after we make that shift. And so just click on that, give you a chance to continue to interact with each other. So I'm going to start doing that Zoom magic. And Scott, if you want to get us started as soon as you see your screens, your slides come up, we'll get rolling here.
We're at the end. Back to the beginning.
Yeah, I knew that. That's what happens when you pre-test, and then forget to reset. So, as I was saying, and I'm going to go ahead and Scott, you actually.
Yeah. So here's the exciting title slide. Today's date, my name, and it has my email address. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. I'm not overwhelmed with email at Truist. So here's my Truist email to send me questions or anything else you want to know. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me that way. I'd like to go around the Zoom meeting and on the introductions and tell us. I already know your name. I guess the organization, the nonprofit organization you support, and your role with that organization would be great to know. I don't have a. Let's see if I don't have a view on who to call. I'll just call on Mike first because that's who I see first.
All right. Hey everybody. My name is Mike Rapay. I'm a financial advisor with Merrill Lynch here in Virginia Beach, and my nonprofit that I work with is are the Virginia Beach JCs.
Great. Jeanette, I see you next on my list here.
I am the president of the Virginia Beach branch of the American Association of University Women.
That's why you look familiar.
Great, thanks. Jenny.
Hi everyone, Jenny Hodges. So I work a lot with the Junior League. I'm in the Virginia Beach area just temporarily, but I work with a lot of organizations in DC where I live.
Great. Teddy.
Yeah, I'm Steve Cotter with Old Dominion University. My nonprofits are actually professional societies. I have a ODU ASQ student chapter that I run at the university. Plus I do analytics, Southeast Regional Director for American Society for Quality, and I do analytics on the Southeast region for them. So mine's not necessarily nonprofit per se, but it's professional society in that terms.
And Max?
Yes, so I'm involved with some ISPI chapters, but don't really deal with analytics with them. But I have a for-profit business that right now is not profitable, and but I'm very interested in membership and community you know, in terms of improving instructional and performance quality.
Great. Do we miss anybody else? Mark, I'll look on the panel.
Good,
Okay.
everybody's.
Great, thanks. My name is Scott Weersing. I currently work for Truist Bank. Truist is the new bank combining SunTrust and BB&T. We merged about a year ago. I work for the corporate university as a senior impact analyst. So I'm responsible for showing the impact of our learning programs through a variety of data, survey data and stuff. I'm also the director of programs for the Hampton Roads chapter of the International Society for Performance Improvement. That's where Mark and I met, and I presented at that. And then I also in charge of marketing for my church and do a bunch of survey design work for that. So kind of 3 different ways of I use surveying. So I'll be combining kind of my best practices from that. Go to the next slide. So again, here's kind of our agenda. We'll talk about, hey, what do you want to know from in your data collection? Then picking, hey, what are some of the different data collection strategies you can use? We'll talk a little bit about design your questions, and then the last part, hey, what to do with the responses, how to analyze that data and to share those responses. That's kind of the key things. If there's some other topics that you want, we have time probably at the end to do that. And again, because we're a small group, this is a discussion where if you have a question or you want to share a story or something that would benefit the rest of the group, please do. It's a kind of a presentation. All righty, now to our next interactive activity.
1 second here. I'll ask everybody to go ahead and mute yourself. We get a little bit of feedback. So if you're not already, go ahead and mute yourself, and you can unmute, when necessary. And I'm going to do that myself. Thanks, Scott.
All right, you can go to the next slide. So again, the key thing is any kind of survey's got to have your big picture kind of thing. So you have to think about, hey, what do you really want to know from your members? So answer, what do you really want to know that you'd hope to get information from them? Put that in the chat, or you can come off a mute, raise your hand, and do that also. Good question for Mark. Why do they come back, or why not come back? What other questions you want to know from your members? Max said what free and paid products and services they would be interested in. Yeah, the program's interesting. That's good. How do they learn about us? That's a good kind of question. All right, we'll go on to next slide. So some of these responses on there, again, that's the key thing. Before you start designing a survey or trying to collect data, you have to think about, hey, what do I really want to know? Because what you want to know will eventually help you select your data strategy and how you're going to do that. Most common things, what do members want from a program, what they like or dislike about a program. If you change things, you want to know, hey, did they like the changes? And then oftentimes you're asking members, what if we changed? What if we met virtual? What if we started meeting in person? What if we did other things? And ask them their likelihood of attending or taking part of a change. Oftentimes, again, how do you market our programs, or how did you hear about us? Because you change things, but you're not really sure, are people hearing you or listening to that? And then kind of overall, you often want to know, hey, how are we doing as an organization? Are we providing value? I mean, obviously attendance at events kind of signifies that also, number of people coming, but sometimes that's you also want to know a little bit more detail about why they value your organization or why they're taking part. So these are just kind of the key things, but this really helps you really determine kind of the focus of a survey or a focus group or whatever you're doing. And you can probably do a couple of these things, but don't try to put all these things into one survey or one thing. You're just going to kind of confuse your member, and it's just going to be kind of overwhelming to them. So again, always try to keep it to one or two things about, hey, what do you want to know, is kind of a best practice. All right, next one. So you've picked what you want to know. Now you got to think about, well, what am I going to do with this data? And so it's something that's a question that most people don't think about. So if you got the answers to those questions, what are you going to do with it? So in the chat or raise your hand, what would you do about it? Hopefully make better decisions. Yes, that's called about being data driven. Yes. Yeah, provide products, services, programs that members need and want. That's a key one, kind of almost market research. Use data to guide what is offered, when, how, and the pricing structure. That's a great one. Make changes driven by the interest of the response. Things, what worked, what doesn't work. Oh, align programming to values. What do you mean by that, Mark? What's align programming to values? Can you elaborate on that one?
So by that, seeking an understanding of what the members value, and for membership associations, what their larger community values. I mean, typically your membership is only a subset of all the people who might have that interest in, be it performance improvement or quality or AAUW's advocacy program. Not every single person who cares about it is necessarily a member. Knowing the values, what's valued by the larger community, could actually be beneficial to increasing your membership, as well as helping your membership expand their views.
Yeah, so you could be providing programs that your members value, but you could be providing programs that attach to people that are non-members also. Increase your membership by increasing what you're offering. That's great.
Exactly.
So Teddy, I like it's an interesting answer. And analyze the relationships between purchase decisions, reasons for purchase, and demographics. Sounds like almost a customer survey. Is that your experience in using and surveys and data collection?
My real experience is in doing surveys for research, but I've been involved when I was in industry. We ran these surveys all the time. So you're always trying to understand who your customer is, why they value your product, what their decision making is going into purchasing your product. They can value your product, but sometimes their decisions will not match their purchases. So you want to pick up that delta, and then you want to understand their demographics so that you can kind of bound what your target markets are for your different products. So mine comes from a combination of having done customer service, well, not done, we always employed professional survey organizations, marketing organizations to design the surveys, but was involved in seeing the analytics and the decision-making process. At ODU, we have formal survey design methods that we follow, that we have to follow. So again, thinking in terms of translating that into a market survey for especially a small business locally, that's kind of my framework.
Yeah, and I think that's the key kind of thing. Just like companies to try to figure out what their offerings at value as part of a nonprofit or a community organization, we have to kind of think of our members as customers. They don't have to come to our programs or our association. There's competition out there, and those kind of key things. That's a good way to kind of think about that. Is always be thinking about your members as customers. They may pay to pay a membership fee or join. They may not, but again, you're trying to attract them and provide a value for their purchase, which oftentimes their purchase is just their time. So making sure that that you value their time and what you're offering to them. So that's a good way to think of it. Thanks for sharing, Teddy. All right, going on to the next slide. So yeah, most kind of changes are going to make changes to your programs. That's usually what we're collecting data from. You may again actually just share it with the board of directors. So be thinking about how you're going to share that data with a broader audience. Also, you may share it back with the members who replied to the survey. So there's a belief that if you share the data back with the survey takers, they're more likely to respond to a survey in the future. I haven't really seen a whole lot of research that's true, but it sounds good. So maybe also sharing it back to the members. Sometimes you have to collect data to share to your national organization. If you're if you're a smaller branch of a larger one, maybe you have to share that data to a national organization. And then another thing I think is really valuable with any kind of survey data is marketing your programs with testimonials. So when you ask people, why do you like the programs, and get those quotes, and you can use those as kind of word of mouth to advertise and share out to get people, because again, I think that is often very valuable, and it's really hard to get those testimonials any other way, but just asking, why did you come to the program? Why did you like it? How do you benefit? Asking those kind of questions, those become testimonials then to kind of market your program. So those are some of the ideas, and one of the ones we've already thought of. All right, next. So there's a couple different types of data collection methods. I want to kind of talk through them. We got a kind of a chart here that shows, the bottom has usefulness and quality of the responses, and then kind of versus the time and effort you put in. So next. So the first one's probably online surveys. It doesn't take a whole lot of time or effort to design one or get responses. However, the usefulness and quality of responses is on probably, what I'd say, on the lower side of items, because oftentimes you don't get, and we'll talk a lot about the positives and negatives of those later on, but that's usually the kind of thing they're fairly useful, but you kind of get what you put into it. Next. Kind of another key one, again, especially if you're part of a smaller organization, is just taking the time to call people up. In this day and age when we're working from home and so disconnected, it's really good just to connect with people, ask them how they're doing. Hey, do you have a few minutes to talk about the organization? So we'll talk about some ways to use phone calls. Yeah, it takes a little bit more time and effort, but you get a lot more usefulness and quality responses, especially asking people to elaborate. And then the next one is kind of focus groups. So this would be kind of just like a Zoom meeting like this, or you meet in person and you gather and you get a chance to sit around and talk and hear different responses, because oftentimes in a focus group, somebody's response, they'll agree to it, they'll disagree to it, they'll add to it. Again, a little bit more robust on the usefulness and quality responses. Not so much time and effort, because you just do it once. And in the corporate world, we don't usually do the phone calls approach, but in the corporate world, do a lot of surveys, and focus groups work pretty well. So those are just kind of things to think about, and trying to pick your, what do you want to know, and what your method is, All right, so go to the next slide. And next. This slide's okay. So what are the positives with an online survey? Well, the good news is they're cheap or free. SurveyMonkey works pretty well. I think it's up to about 100 responses for free, and if you want to get more than that, you need to pay for it, but that's a really pretty simple one. It's fairly easy to get responses. You can send them out via email or at the end of a meeting. It's pretty easy to analyze the data, and again, it's you can get the anonymous data. However, I think there's a bunch of negatives with the next one. You go to the next. So negatives. Problem is that is the low response rate. you can send it out, but oftentimes you get about a 20 to 30% response rate, which isn't that great. So it's like, that's why, again, one of those things with we'll talk about with phone calls. We'll come back to that comment that Teddy had about phone calls. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So that's, and then again, with surveys, oftentimes you have a lack of details as why they chose a response. So if they pick strongly disagree or strongly agree or pick some response, you're not exactly sure why unless you specifically ask that question in there. So you kind of, oftentimes when you're sharing responses from a survey, your stakeholders or leaders want to know, well, why are the results so bad or why are the results so good? And surveys oftentimes don't answer the why. Go back for a second. Mark, go back. All right, now you can go back. Okay. So oftentimes with the survey, you don't get that, you don't collect that many new ideas. I'll talk about some survey design questions to make sure you get new ideas. But oftentimes you ask people, what should we change? And you get no responses. So oftentimes that's a problem with things. And then anonymous, you don't know who gave a response because you didn't have any demographic questions or you didn't actually put their name in or something like that. So if you want to follow up with somebody about why they were upset or why they like something, you don't really know. So are people more willing to share stuff if they're anonymous? I'm not really sure. There's always been that belief that if you do anonymous surveys, you get better responses. I'm not really sure that's true or not. It sounds good, but again, you really want to, you have somebody who is upset, you'd like to know who they are. So that's some of the kind of the negatives. So kind of it's up to you to decide, hey, if I'm going to do an online survey or am I going to do another data collection method? I just wanted to present to you the pros and cons with online surveys that I've kind of learned. All right, next. All right, so here's some of the questions with phone calls. You can call them up and kind of with a set of open-ended questions. So again, it's gonna provide more details and richness and helps answer that question why. You're like, well, I don't want to do all that, but you can involve those board of directors in collecting the data and meeting the members. Some of the kind of the questions you can ask is, how is the organization providing value to you? This would be really hard you can answer this in an online survey, but you're not going to get a clear response. What do you like about the name of about our organization? That's just a placeholder name of org. And then maybe another question, what prevents you from being more involved? Or what are the barriers? Some of these kind of open-ended questions. And then Teddy in the chat noticed, hey, what are the disadvantages? Well, your phone calls is spoofed, so people have blocked phone numbers and stuff. So that may, customers know your number and will answer. So maybe it's like, sending an email to them, hey, can I give you a call from this number at this time, this evening or something like that. So you maybe can email people to get around the phone call approach. But that's good to know that, yeah, I wouldn't probably blindly call your members to ask them these kind of things. Email them first and see if it's okay, then they're going to recognize your number. But I didn't think about the spoofed number calls because you might be getting a call saying your car warranty is expired, not that one again. So any other questions or comments about phone calls?
Sure, I'll throw one out there. So yeah, absolutely. I don't know how many times you guys answer something that comes across your cell phone and you don't know the number. I know for me, it's precisely never. But some of the research, or some of the readings I've done on this, suggest text as an opener. Maybe in parallel or in lieu of an email, can I talk to you? Just send a text, because everybody looks at their texts, right? And well, everybody, but a lot more people. It's something like over 90% of people will acknowledge a text, simply by looking at it or opening it. Whereas phone calls from unrecognized numbers are pretty bleak. So I just shared that. Not something that I'm using now to think about.
Yeah, I would recommend also that for nonprofits, as it is for our professional societies, there's that personal contact. And I think what Mark is getting at here for the nonprofits and for us, you have to develop that whole suite of personal contacts, the personal interaction, the text message, the phone call, but not such that it's intrusive. Another issue that I have in all of my emails, both personal and at school, is everybody's got me on, what is it, the speed dial, the notifications. And my first effort every morning, just go through delete, 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 delete. You don't want to be in the delete section. You want to have that personal working relationship so that when they see you, oh yes, I know them, I like their products, let's respond, let's give them some feedback.
Mark, are there organizations that remind people about webinars or programs via text, or is it mainly via email? I never thought about using a text message like, hey, there's a webinar today at 12 o'clock. What's the use of text messages to remind people about programs? Have you seen that much?
I personally haven't seen that, but it's also not really a question I've ever asked of folks who participate with the consortium, or I've come across it. But there's a few places where I'm going to take a look at that and see if we can gain some more insight there. I see it, a little bit on the commercial side, and I found it to be pretty effective. Hey, reminder, this is coming up. It's Friday noon. Your favorite.
I got that from Sweet Frog saying, buy one get one free day special at our yogurt place, because you opted into text messages. But that could be, again, I never thought about for a nonprofit. If people are ignoring emails, but they look at text messages, wouldn't that be another way to communicate to our members of our nonprofits, is using texts?
And actually, that's on. So I asked everybody who registered for this to provide their cell phone number, and I did that only for the case that for some reason we had to last minute postpone or cancel this. So it has occurred to me that, hey, this would also be pretty good for texting a reminder or stuff like that. But I don't have that mechanism, like you're saying, Scott, in place right now to ask for permission or say we may use this to text.
So there's another topic for a webinar: how to use text messages to communicate to your members of your nonprofit.
It's actually on the list for 2021. So I'm sure.
Okay, I was like, oh, I'd come to that session, because that sounds like an interesting way of how do you communicate. Again, what's the mechanism? I don't think I want to do it off of my phone, but there must be some systematic ways to send out text messages.
Yes. So one of my associates is a marketing guru and has a brother that has a marketing or an advertising agency. And he was talking to me the other day about the capability of sending out messages by text. And obviously at some point you have to ask the people, if they prefer it by text or by email or whatever, but normally they'd give their permission. They're supposed to give their permission before you start sending these things.
I have seen surveys through text, but you answer the survey and it takes you to a more complex survey. If you're willing to answer one question, you're willing to answer 4 or 5 questions. So some companies have done that. I don't recommend that for a nonprofit or for us in this circumstance of sending a text to answer a survey, but you could technically text them a link to your survey too. So, I mean, and we'll come to that, how to get responses. I'll add that one to the list, because it really hadn't occurred to me in 2021 to start using text messages more. But
now another possibility, depending on your membership and their openness to Zoom meetings, but one-on-one Zoom meetings can be very effective. So the same thing as this phone call. You could set up a Zoom meeting with somebody also. That's exactly the same kind of thing. It takes a little bit more work to set that up, and again, depends on the richness that you need. So great. I'll go on to the next slide, Mark. So again, a Zoom call, which Max was just talking about, it's just, again, much like a phone call, but rather have a group of people answering questions. One of the advantages of a Zoom call is you can record it and transcribe the quotes. So now you're collecting those interesting quotes that you can eventually share
with your leadership or who you're trying to share. Phone calls are a little bit harder to record. You're gonna have to just type stuff and look for commonalities and stuff. But so that's one of those kind of key things where you can get another method to again collect data. All right, we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so you still want to do an online survey. Maybe I haven't talked you off of doing a phone call or a Zoom thing, so I was going to kind of talk about some best practices that I've kind of see and probably one of the best ways to do a survey is, rate your agreement with the following statement. But oftentimes what the people are missing is they don't know what they can't answer that. So for example, I'll be able to apply what I learned in this session on the job tomorrow. Maybe you're not going to design a survey tomorrow or do anything about the surveys on this thing. So you're like, I don't think I'm going to do anything on this tomorrow. So I'm going to put NA. So that gives you an idea that maybe your topic wasn't really that practical of a topic, rather than that they, not disagreeing on those kind of stuff. So that's something kind of just a basic kind of thing. Most scales should start off with your disagree first and your strongly agree on that side. There's been some research that you'll have kind of biased results if you put strongly agree first, which I thought was surprising, but okay. So that's kind of a best practice on that one. You can drop neither disagree or agree and leave that out, and then you're making them to make a forced choice, but you still probably put an NA. Because again, if you and don't use the word neutral in the middle, because then people think that's if they don't have any opinion, which is what NA means, non-applicable. I have no opinion, kind of key thing. So those are just some of the key things. And then if you really want to, be specific to make sure that that the objectives of your program are actually being recalled, you can ask that question: what from this session will you be able to apply on the job tomorrow? So that's always something we use in the corporate world for learning is, hey, what from this training will you be able to use? And if they can't remember anything, then it wasn't a very good training. So that's something, another kind of get a little bit more robust on that to make sure that people can actually recall what they attended. So those are some of the some best practices. Go on to the next slide.
Actually, before we jump ahead, Teddy had a pretty cool question about, kind of goes back to the Zoom conference, but Scott, take a look at that, see if we want to answer that or come back to that.
What do you mean by that, Teddy, instead of request review of nonprofit service for?
It's part of the overall communication strategy. So surveys are one thing, phone calls another thing. Using Zoom, you can have structured questions, but you can also have, like at the university, our department has an industry advisory board. We invite them in for lunch a couple of times a year. And just sit down and this is our mission, this is where we're going. What is it you really need from our graduates in terms of skill sets? How is it changing? And it's an open forum discussion. We throw out a couple of key questions and then we record the meeting, and you could easily do that on Zoom. So there's a time for the survey and there's the time for keeping it informal and having those open-ended questions that allow people to answer what you wouldn't ask on the survey itself. Survey is excellent for structuring what you need to know, but as you've already pointed out, it has the limitations. If you don't put it on the survey, you're not going to get the response.
Yeah, I mean that's a great way to, again, to make sure that, hey, is your nonprofit organization meeting the needs of the members of the people it's serving? And so that's always kind of key thing to be asking. And you can even do, like you just said, have people come together. That could be one of your program nights. We've done that for our Hampton Roads ISPI, where we just have an discussion where we don't have a presenter or a program, but it's mainly just talking about, what do you need? what do you need from this organization the next year? So that's always good to make sure that you're providing, a service or a value to your members. So thanks for sharing that. Do you do that, Mark? Because you work with a whole bunch of nonprofits. Do you bring them together to make sure that you're providing a service for them?
Not as much as I'd like to. So informally, it's more the phone call type thing, email into a phone call. For example, the local chapter of Project Management Institute, I've been on the phone with a couple of their leadership saying, I noticed a bunch of you participating in this, you're having this struggle. In addition to what I asked you on the survey, what other things, do you think that we should be looking at to service you, not so much as project management folks, but as leaders of a membership association. But I've never done it focus group style, if you will, where I invite a bunch of organizations into a common mix. That's pretty neat point. So I'm busily scratching my chin thinking about yes and how.
Great, thanks. Any other questions or comments? Okay, go to the next slide then, Mark. So back to, again, trying to make sure you design your surveys in the best way. One of the most common questions in a survey, hey, what should be topics of future programs? But you need to kind of prompt them. If you just answer the question with no choices for them, you're not going to get really any choices. You're not going to spark their interest and get them thinking about what they really need. So oftentimes, again, it's time to brainstorm some possible topics. So, which of the following topics would you attend? Would you like to attend? If the topic was networking or job opportunities or retirement or mentoring, or I just came up with a variety of lists that could come up with anything. So then you get people kind of actually a chance to add topics and to vote on ones. And so then you can start prioritizing, hey, we should have a program about networking because that's really important to our members. Or, hey, we want to do more mentoring in this. Maybe we should do a topic about mentoring, or whatever the topics you could come up with. And then, and again, just about every survey tool that I know of will allow you to put other as a choice and then people can add your own. So then you're going to be able to see some. So that's kind of another good way to design a survey is to provide topics for them. You just have to brainstorm them out, just a few, so they can start. So it's voting on them and prompts them to think about it. Next. So another one of my favorite, questions, whether you're using the corporate world or in the nonprofit world, is, hey, how likely are you to recommend our program organization to a peer? So that's kind of the key. It's a question, and what it allows you to do is calculate actually a net promoter score. So now you can actually compare, benchmark one program against another one, or that based really kind of on this one. It's it's often it's used in the corporate world, how likely to recommend our company to a peer. And again, it's a 0 to 10. 0 is unlikely and 10 is unlikely. It's called a net promoter question. You also really need to ask, why did you choose the number in the question above? Those become your kind of key things on why they liked it so much and why they didn't like it. So those provide even more valuable insight. So to get a net promoter score, it's the percentage of people that responded 9 or 10 minus the percentage of 0s and 6s. 7s and 8s don't count for anything. So, technically a good net promoter score is about a 40. So maybe 20 people respond and you have 10 people that gave a program a 10 and 5 people that gave it a program of a 1. What would be the NPS score? So you'd have, 10 out of 20 is 50%, 5 out of 20 is 25%, so 25 is your NPS score. Obviously, I've done programs that had an NPS score of 0 because we had 50% people liked it and 50% people didn't like it, so it was 0. I've seen programs that had NPS scores of negative, where you had more people who didn't like it than who liked it. So kind of so obviously it's a percentage, it's a ratio of kind of things. I have done, I did a program once that had an NPS score of like 95, which means everybody loved it, which was just like the highest ever you kind of ever seen. But again, a good net promoter score is around 40. You're trying to get that, but it's again kind of a way to give you a benchmark or a number for your program or your organization, over time and such. Obviously, as you can, you'll probably look at my response. My example is only 20 people. Obviously, you can get you change your score a lot by just 1 or 2 people. So I would say you need at least 20 to 30 responses to get a real, valid NPS score. Any questions or comments about a net promoter question?
So one of the things I really like about this, and I think it's such a powerful question, is this is where you can really extract some honesty, because it truly speaks to when somebody says, yeah, I give this a 10 or a 9, they're really putting their credibility on the line. So you kind of have to, not just satisfy their needs, but it's almost like, are you wowing them to the point where they say, oh my God, the next time this rolls around, you should go there. I'm personally vouching for this. It's kind of like a recommendation or a referral, from somebody
I mean, and another question is, how many people can you think of people to recommend to it? So, and remember, every survey, you're collecting data from people, but you're also trying to signal them to an action. So hopefully you're like, oh, maybe they will recommend our program to appear in their network and grow your organization, because that's how most people find out. Why do most people come to your meetings or programs? A friend invited them. So again, you're trying to prompt them to do that even through this survey. It's like, oh, maybe I should invite somebody on this, and this is why. So you're kind of giving them a chance to practice their pitch to somebody by just answering the survey. So just kind of one of my favorite kind of questions to use in a survey. Go on to next. So again, here's an example of, what should we change? That's often a question in a survey. What should we change about our programs or time and stuff like that? So you got to, again, give them choices. If you don't, you probably won't get responses. So oftentimes is, how often should we change the frequency, the time of the day, the location, the technology? Should we do it in Zoom or face-to-face, something like that? The topics, the format, give them some kind of choices. So again, back to the question earlier, you get a chance to vote on what those are. And then again, probably maybe an other, but then you get some ideas of what you should change or dig deeper into on our next survey or question. Next. So ways to collect more surveys. I often ask, how do I get more surveys? So you can use an AR code during in-person meetings. So those AR code is that funky looking square box that your phone can read. And so people can just hold it up to their phone and the survey is automatic to their phone. They can take it right then. So that works for in-person meetings. You can, in a Zoom call, you can put the link to a survey in the chat. That's kind of a good way. They'll see that and they can click on it at the end of your meeting. You can send out via email, which is a good follow-up. Oftentimes, if you really want to be particular, don't make it anonymous. There are survey tools that will send out a survey to each and every email address and tell you who's responded. So then you can kind of remind those people, hey, you didn't respond yet. So there's some other ways. That's why at times I'm not a big fan of anonymous surveys. You want to know who's responded, so that you can track, how many of our members and which members we should remind. So that's just something, again, to, if you want to increase your response rates, don't make it anonymous. I was doing a survey with the Coast Guard and we were surveying the use of a technology tool. So we had a list of everybody who used the technology tool and we sent the survey to them. And then we could track that they hadn't responded yet. So again, we anonymized, we made their replies confidential, but we still wanted to make sure we got every response from, 80% of the people. Obviously, keep the survey short. That gets you more responses. Again, tell them what you're going to do with the data and then share it at a later time. People are more likely to be involved if they know kind of the purpose of the survey. So oftentimes at the beginning of a survey, a little spiel about, hey, why we're collecting this data and what we hope to do. Hey, like we liked your feedback on our programs and we hope to change them. And then again, share that responses with them so that you're valuing their input. And then the newest, again, the newest one, collect more responses in an online survey, send it out via text. That's not on this list, but I will add it, is another way to send out survey via text, because that might work out too as another way, just like the AR code on your phone, sending out via text. Any other methods people use to get surveys, responses to an online survey from people on the phone?
Yeah, you can offer a prize or a drawing for a prize.
Yep, offer incentives always kind of work. Yep, that's oftentimes, hey, if you'd like to be entering the drawing, please put your email address in here. And then you just do a random select your thing to do that. Yep. Or you instead of a prize, if you'd like to receive a copy of this report, put your email address in, because then you can send them a copy of the report. I've seen that also. Thanks, Max. All right, and go on to the next slide, Mark. All right, so what do I do with the responses? So remember way back in the beginning, we were trying to figure out, what do we want to know? So that kind of triggers what to do with the responses. I remember we had things we want to, we wanted to know if people like the program, what changes, what we marketing. So always kind of remember to go back to that, because that helps you with the analysis. You're trying to, figure out key things you didn't remember. So that's always a step. Oftentimes we get the data and we forget what we were trying to, do here. And so that's always time to kind of remember to do that. So what are the responses? So usually, the number of people who chose a response, that can be pretty helpful and can, signify things, especially on those responses where people were kind of voting or picking which topic they liked. You can do a percentage of responses for each choice. So you had, 100 people replied, then 75% of people pick strongly agree or those things. That's a good way to report that. Another thing that I like to use is a top two box. So it's the percentage of people who chose the two favorable responses on the scale. So for example, 9 out of 10 people responded with agree or strongly agree, your score, your top two box score would be 90%. So that works out, that becomes a lot more understandable to stakeholders and leaders and just to everybody. Oftentimes people don't do that. They take and they convert these statements into numbers, and we got an average response of 4.5 on that question, but that doesn't tell anybody what we're going to do. So and averages get screwed up. So that's my big warning. Do not use averages from your survey results, because again, 4.5 doesn't mean anything, and the math on averages gets really screwed up. Even, and that's why a top two boxing gives you a scale of 0 to 100, while if you use like a 1 to 5 scale, you only got a 5-point scale. There's not a whole lot of difference in it. So that's kind of the key things on my, how to analyze the data and what to do with it, is just some kind of best practices on that. I like top two box the best. Probably my second favorite is just the number of people who chose each response, kind of thing. And then you're trying to figure out, what changes to make. Well, hopefully you'll have this, whatever change that needs to be made has the strongest number to it. Any comments or questions about what to do with responses on this slide? Okay, go on to the next slide, Mark. So another practice to do is, what do you do with all those statements from your survey? So in the academic world that Teddy's from and I'm from and like that is what we called code the responses. So you group the like responses into buckets or themes. So, you know, when you asked them what they liked about something, it's like, could be about the room or the topic or the speaker. I mean, you're trying to, and those become then you can start counting and turning those qualitative responses, statements, into quantitative. And you can report something like 8 people said they liked the meeting via Zoom because of the convenience. So there you go. Maybe you're coding it of like why people liked it because of convenience, you know, and that becomes your kind of code word and stuff like that. So it just takes a little bit of time and practice to code them. But even if you have, you know, 50 to 100 responses, you start seeing themes or trends that have become similar on stuff. And oftentimes when you code the responses, you get the response of nothing. And so you get, you know, when we asked people, what should we change? Well, 30 people said nothing, which means that's probably a positive, and keep doing what you're doing. At Truist, we had a learning survey and we had required answers, which I wouldn't recommend. Do not make any question required to answer because it'll frustrate people. But at Truist, we decided to make all the state questions required. And one of the questions was, what should we improve about our training? And it was required. And I think like 50% of the people put nothing because they had to answer the question. Because I was wondering, how come I get so many nothing responses? Then I realized it was a required question, which I told them that's going to frustrate people because they can't move on to their next task. They can't even submit the survey unless they submit something in there. And so a lot of people put nothing or NA. So that's why another best practice is don't do required responses to a question. Let them skip it. So that's probably the best way what to do with those qualitative one is just to code them. Any other best practices from our listeners today about what to do with the statements you receive?
Use graphs and charts.
True. Yeah, I didn't come up with a whole bunch of variety of graphs and charts kind of thing. Just about any Excel or anything that will, and most of the survey tools will often graph your responses in order to. I didn't have a whole lot of examples in here, but yeah, that's obviously try to make the responses visual. But and again, you can take things and compare one program to another with an MPS question or just, you know, the usefulness of the program or those kind of things. So you should also try to ask the same questions each and every time you do a program so you can kind of compare and benchmark different items. That kind of takes us to the end of our presentation. Next.
And be honest with your data.
What do you mean, Max?
Well, what I mean is you can emphasize certain things or de-emphasize. It's easy to manipulate or provide interpretation that's not necessarily representative of the data.
Yes. That's the key thing is try to be transparent with the data. And oftentimes, you know, I'll send out the raw responses just to let people know, hey, I'm not making things up here. This is what it was. So I think that's the key thing, because oftentimes if you're collecting the data but you have some skin in the game, then you're going to be biased towards that. So maybe you have somebody else analyze or look at the data that isn't biased towards it. So or somebody have a second person look at it. Because again, oftentimes we want to hide the negative news and accent the positive news, and you want to kind of use both. Unfortunately, what I found out with most surveys, there's not a whole lot of ahas either way. It's like it's right in the middle, and then you're like, oh, this survey didn't provide us what we really wanted to know. We're going to have to do a focus group or a telephone call to get some detailed responses, because it didn't move it one way or the other. That's usually what happens, I find out. But yeah, I think that's a good practice is try to throw away your biases or your hypothesis, because oftentimes people use surveys for confirmation bias. they think the program's great, so they send it out to that. And then obviously who you send the survey out, make sure it's, you know, a varied audience, or actually the audience that went to the program, because sometimes you can bias your responses by who you selectively send the survey out to. Go to the next slide. So, you know, again, this is kind of a get to the end of the presentation of, you know, what else do you want to know about data and survey analytics, or what are your best practices? This is kind of a chance to open up to the rest of the group to share either a best practice or to ask a follow-up question.
So I just attended a presentation by Bonnie Beersford, and Scott worked with her. But I think one of the key issues to identify the key indicators that you should be looking at, so that you're asking the right questions.
Yeah, one of the things that was on my agenda, but I didn't have a slide for, is while you can use your online surveys and phone calls and Zoom things, your organization also has other data that will help you answer questions, like attendance. You know, how many people came to that program? How many people renewed their membership? How many people came to the program because they were invited by a friend? So besides the data you're collecting from a survey, think about the other data or key performance indicators that your organization already collects, and those become part of your story and stuff. You know, again, we're trying to make decisions, but, you know, is there any correlation between the survey data and people coming back? You know, they said they'd recommend a friend, but did we actually get more people the next time? And maybe it wasn't the topic, maybe it was the time and the place or something like that. And so, again, hopefully, you know, oftentimes I think the data you collect from a survey becomes a leading indicator and predicts other data. You know, if you're getting good responses on your survey, then your attendance will go up and your renewals will increase, and you'll get more, you know, have more people invite a friend. If you're getting negative things on that, you're like, okay, what can we change to change those other indicators? So that's something also to be thinking about, is, again, surveys is not your only data collection technique. You have to use other ones, like just your program attendance and memberships and those numbers. So those are kind of other things that I had on the agenda, but I didn't have a slide. But, you know, don't forget about other data that your membership chair has, or your outreach chair or something like that, because that becomes helpful data to kind of tell your story and answer some of those questions of what did you want to know.
Yeah, Scott, if they just, you know, extend on that, and kind of pulls me back to my, you know, not so wonderful answer to your question of me about, you know, gathering people over Zoom. So one of the statistics that we've for the consortium that has always been available, but not in an analytical form, and changed that, you know, a few months ago, is I now know over, you know, since November 8th, 2017, our very first program, who are the folks that come back, which I think is, you know, very, very valuable, because obviously nothing that we offer here is compulsory, right? So those who actually volunteer to come back and say, I want to learn again. And the idea being that we take a look at, you know, the top 10, top whatever of those, and invite them to some special Zoom meeting. We certainly won't do a survey because, you know, you clearly stated that surveys suck. But, you know, try and gather those folks for insights on, you know, why do you come back? You know, and it might be just because they like the looks of me. It's probably not it. It's probably more about, you know, valuable content from, you know, great presenters. You know, or, you know, you were hitting the things that I was struggling with in the moment. So, you know, that's, you know, just kind of putting those together. So in addition to the saying, here's how good we are, it's like, there's a rich source of information from these folks who, you know, came back more than once.
Thanks, Mark. That's good examples on that. And then the last slide on this deck is just some basic things. I went off my expertise, but I'm like, hey, here's some good things that I'm that would help nonprofits and stuff. So these are just some links to some other articles that I had saw that I was addressing, but if you want to dig a little bit deeper and stuff. And then again, just reach out to me if you're designing a survey. I'd love to give feedback on surveys and see if they resonate. So I'm glad to donate my time to help your organization improve their surveys and whatever they're doing. So I love doing that kind of thing. So please reach out to me if you need any help with a survey review, or just even designing a basic survey. I can kind of help that out in a half-hour call. So that's kind of an offer from this. If hey, what to do next, you can definitely connect with me via my email on this front of this deck, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Available that way too. So thanks for taking. Thanks.
Just real quick on contacting Scott. Everybody on Friday will receive, all our attendees will receive, as part of a thank you note, a link to a resources page. So we'll have a copy of the slide deck up there. We'll have Scott's contact information, and everybody who agreed to share their email or their contact information will be there as well. So don't worry if you didn't get all this stuff written down. We'll get it to you Friday morning.
Any other closing comments, Mark? Are we about ready to close it off?
Oh yeah, there's a couple other things here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. So now it's all about us. There you go. And there we go. So those of us who are still left. So Scott, I'm gonna kind of put you on the spot here, if you will. So at this point, I usually do two things. So I'm going to do the first one and put in the chat box. This is our next event, exactly 1 month from today. Same bat time, same bat channel. We're going to have Deanie Dormer, who's an event strategist, come by and talk about the transition to or into hybrid events where we they're all events are still in person, just some of them are co-located. So what do you do if you have an audience that's partly on Zoom or some other platform and partly right there in the conference space with you? So kind of looking forward to that. The link in there will just take you right to more details and registration. But the part where I want to put Scott on the spot, as it were, is this next link. So normally, at this point, in addition to say thank you for your kind attendance and pat each other on the back and virtual high fives and all that other stuff, I ask folks to take a survey. So we do this after every single session we've offered over the years, and essentially it's been the exact same survey. So I'm going to put that in the chat room or chat space. But before taking it, I'd like all of you to click on the link, and then so it's going to pop up another window. And then Scott, if you'd be so kind, could you critique the damn thing for me?
Sure thing. Let's
Like
critique
3 or 4
this survey.
questions.
But you can share. I mean, if you call it up, we could just all be looking on the desktop. But I don't know how you want to
The
do it.
subtlety of me asking people to open it up is because then maybe we'll actually take the survey because it's fun. See what I did there?
See if I can. Mine's having a hard time coming up now. I don't know why.
See, there's always somebody. All right, bear with me.
So you can. Oh, here it is. All right.
Got it? Everybody got it? Raise your hands if you
All
get
right.
through.
So I'm gonna kind of go through just what top of the thing. Obviously, you're asking about a specific program. You want to share their thoughts. It doesn't say what you're going to do with this data, so maybe that could be something to add on there. I'll use this data to improve our program, and I don't know what you're doing with this. Why should I, what's in it for me? Why should I provide you this data on that one?
Fair enough.
How well do you feel you understand the concepts presented? It's pretty simple. Choose one, it's a drop down. It doesn't have an NA, because what if I don't like any of these responses? So this survey format may be different than people because they're long answers. And so you may not get a lot of responses because people don't want to read through all these long responses. This is almost a forced choice survey instead of usually the sort of question would be, I understand the concepts presented today, and then you rate your agreement to it. And this one is now you want them to be a little more specific on where they are with these, on these kind of things. And so that, people might get tired reading on those. I like the use of the all caps, because that kind of gives you kind of an idea of what the question's about. Am I confused? Do I have basic familiarity? Do I have solid understanding? I love the last one. I have an expert level understanding of the intentions of this one. Then you probably didn't need to come to this session. If people check that one, then you have the wrong audience for your session.
And it's true. My observations looking at this, that's very rarely selected.
Yeah. Well, and that's the key thing on this response scale. You have to kind of determine what responses do you want. Ideally, you probably want people that pick the first three. Otherwise, you didn't have the right audience. If people have, that's always the question with this kind of scale is, what are positives and what are negatives? It doesn't align very well. So, that's just my critique on that. I like the colors, but it makes it sound like the green is the one that you want people to pick. You're kind of keying them towards that. So I probably wouldn't color any of them, because you're like, oh, I'm supposed to pick the green one. Because if one of them was red, they're like, oh, so that, I don't know how you color coded them, but I probably wouldn't color code them. All right. Sometimes people will face obstacles or difficulties applying new learning to their jobs. What preparations did the session provide to help you deal with the obstacles? So it's maybe a kind of a wordy one. I think you're asking, did this, what helped, what was in this session that helped me be successful? Or what's in this session that helped me overcome barriers?
So this is, yes, right. It's, and it is predictive, right? The first two questions, about did you understand it? Are you motivated to use it? Speak to an immediate reaction. This one I think is a little bit deeper questions. And it's one of the things that I challenge presenters with is say, think about actually using this stuff. What are some, things that might be in the way of moving it from theory to practice? I think, for example, not that I'm trying to sway anybody's, response here, but, we talked about, and we had, a discussion amongst ourselves here about the challenges with getting people to answer the phone. So there's an obstacle or difficulty in, soliciting that individual response. So we say, well, maybe an email ahead of time, will pave the way for that, or offering an incentive or a text or something like that. So,
yeah, well,
and it takes this long to explain the question, that can be problematic.
Yeah, well, and I would send this survey to your presenters saying, hey, these are the things that make a good presentation. People are motivated, they had practice, they, these kind of key things, if these are the things that you're looking for in a presentation, send this out back to your presenters. Hey, I've been doing these presentations for 3 years. Here's the key 3 things that your presentation should have. It should have, hopefully you motivate people through this, give them some practice, things like that. We didn't have a whole lot of practice. I didn't give people, I could have done a whole practice session on bad survey questions, and we could have practiced revising them, but I didn't go into that kind of stuff. I'm fine. I like how motivated will you be use these skills in your organization. That's a great question. And I like the, your optional, what else would you like to learn about leading organizations? Those are pretty key kind of things. So overall, I like all these questions. Again, probably the third one is you know, just, I'm not sure what that question is asking. I get a better idea when I check the options, but that's always kind of, you know, the wording of that question isn't as simple as the first two, you know. And then, you know, and I like it. You're not asking, what future topics would you like? Because people always ask that, and I'm just like, you don't get a lot of feedback on that unless you're getting them to vote or rate on stuff. So I'm glad you didn't ask that question, because it's not really a useful question, but people always
ultimately,
throw
that's
it
what
on
I
there.
choose. Ultimately, that's what I want to do with this is, you know, look at trends and say, you know, we never
Yeah.
hit this, or it's not in our curriculum. But yeah, topics sounds like you're doing my work for me. This question is more, you know, it's still the same thing, but it's looser. I'm happy to interpret, or, you know, well, these are anonymous, but you know, I can dig in. And usually, because we have pretty intimate groups, I could probably figure out who asked that question anyway. So.
Well, and then the other thing is the red star probably means is required, so I can't skip any of these questions, which means
you
like,
can't.
well, which means if I don't like any of these options, there's no NA. Like none of the above. I'd probably add that to these ones, because it's just like, well, I don't, you know.
That's right.
And I'm not really sure what intentions mean. I have a basic familiarity with the intentions. I guess that's better than concepts. I don't, because your question says, how well do you understand the concepts? But your options don't say concepts, they say intentions. So it doesn't match. Your options don't match your question in the first one. Sorry, I just realized that. I'm like,
it's really cool. This, you know, this, you know, one of those classic cases of, you know, forest and trees are too close to the problem or whatever. And it's also easy to fix. So thank you.
yeah, that's just like, you know, I mean, I think I understand what's, you know, I guess it's the topics or the ideas, you know, I don't, but it's not intentions, because I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, use these skills in your organization. That's pretty good. I like that question. I don't know if my job here was to motivate people. Like, you should be collecting data because it's really important. I didn't have a whole slide about how data is important. You coming today showed me that you're interested in data and surveys. Again, motivation. Yeah. So overall, I think I kind of like this. I like this survey.
Very cool. All right, thanks, Scott. I appreciate it, and I hope this was you know, this little bonus exercise was useful to everybody, or most everybody here, and not just something I dragged you through because of.
And again, if anybody else who wants me to critique a survey like this again, it's pretty simple 10-15 minute kind of thing to go over. So set up a
You don't
time.
necessarily have to do it publicly, right? Like me.
Yeah. you got thick skin, Mark. You're like, okay, go ahead, critique my survey.
Okay, you're not my boss. You can't compel change. All right. Well, with that, Scott, I want to thank you, you know, one more time. This is, you know, I think this was a great session. Wish more people were here to join us, but, you know, I say that pretty much every time too. You know, that is the price of free. You know, there's a lot of people, this many people register, and this many people care enough to show up, and this many people stay to the end. That's just the way this thing works. So, and
Yeah,
I'm
that's
abundantly
fine.
cool with that. If you got something here, you know, that you can take away with you and help elevate your organization or any other part of your community or your work life, that's great. You know, I'll pat myself on the back if that's the case for you. With that, folks, I know we said we'll go to 1:30, or we're open to 1:30, but I'll offer you the gift of time, and thank you all for being here. I'll leave the chat room, you know, or I mean, I'll leave the space open here, you know, for a couple of minutes in case you got some questions, you know, either for me or Scott, if you can hang around, or if it's just me and Scott staring at each other, then we're done. So with that, thank you so much.